You join us at the Car Barn this evening to look at something very special. It's something that has just arrived with us and we think needs a little bit more time and detail spent on it than the normal cars we get here, because this is a Jaguar XJ13 recreation by Proteus, and just look at it, isn't it fantastic? First of all, we're going to look at the history of this car as to how it came about, and then we're going to look at this specific car as well as to what makes this particular car very special. So to start with, the Jaguar XJ13. In the 1950s, Jaguars were synonymous with the straight-six engine from the XKs that powered the C-types and the D-types, but soon they realised that they're going to have to up the game again as the competitors come out. So they started to develop a new car. They decided it's going to have a V12. They needed that extra power. They needed to put it in the middle, mid-engined. An important point of these cars from the front engine era of the D-type and the C-type moved away to the more modern mid-engine configuration, which all the Grand Prix cars by the mid-60s had in the end. So they had a V12 engine that they wanted to develop. They had a new car then that they could develop with it. They developed the chassis, they developed the body, they got a beautiful design created for the car, very aerodynamic. So then they had the space to develop this V12 with this specific chassis, so it was going to be a perfect all-round racing car. Then came the mid-60s, 1966, a merger with BMC, and that was the start of the end for this car. The bean counters got involved, as they always did, and decided that they should focus on production cars more, and spending money on racing cars wasn't a good use of resources, which would be much a pity because this car had lots of potential. They were developing a quad cam version of the V12 engine for this car to give that extra performance. Rumour has it over 500 horsepower. So it got to late 60s, 66, 67. They decided to give up on it, put it away, put it in storage. What a shame, such a beautiful car. Come 1971, they were ready to launch the V12 E-Type, the Series 3 E-Type. So for some medium promotion, they wheeled out the XJ13, ready for some medium press photographs and videos. They took it to Myra, where the high-speed bowl is, at the testing centre there, and it actually held the highest average speed lap record for about 30 years, this car, over at Myra. So Norman Jewis, the legendary Jaguar test driver, took the car out, did a few laps, and as ever, you'll know on track days, if you're thinking about doing one extra lap, you don't do the one extra lap because that's when it all goes wrong. As Norman Jewis tipped it into the banking, 140 odd miles an hour, a wheel fell off. They didn't think about replacing the wheels after being in storage for so long. It was well over age, fatigued, and off he went. Rolled over the banking, landed up in a field, I think on his head, but he was all right, he was okay. The car wasn't, unfortunately, and the car was absolutely totaled. It was rebuilt, and they still have the one version of it. You'll now find it in the Jaguar Heritage Trust at Gaydon, where you can go and see the original. And then it was time to have the people look at trying to recreate this, because if there's only one in the world, what a shame that would be if it's kept in a museum. So then we move forward and fast forward from the tale of the Jaguar that once was, to a man called Jim Marland. Jim Marland is from a company called Proteus, and they were already making C-types and D-types, and he decided that the next one has to be the XJ13. So he went about creating a replica and a recreation of that famous Jaguar that nearly was. So he got wooden books made, he went around trying to make this body work, and the design of the car as true to the original as possible. It was so true to the original as possible, in fact, that when they got the windscreens made from the original castings and fitted it to their new body, it was only 1/4 of an inch out from fitting perfectly. This is the level they went to and the detail they went to make sure this car was as accurate as possible. To give you an idea of the attention to detail they had when making this car, they needed a set of wheels and they need to make sure they're accurate. So they got some made off the original castings of the XJ13. So now, as you can see, it really does look the part with these wheels on the vehicle. So going on to the engine of this car, the engine was the reason why the XJ13 was created, I suppose, as a showpiece and to get this engine working as best as it can. Originally a quad-cam V12 engine in the original XJ13. Jaguar decided not to proceed with that. They thought it wasn't refined enough to go in all the saloon cars of that period. Too much high-end power. What a problem to have, eh? But now it's a twin-cam V12, originally 5.2 litres, now being made by a Dave Butcher Engines, who was one of the men to go to in the mid-90s for these engines, into a 6.1 litre, dry sump lubricated, fuel injected as well. It's got the beautiful trumpets on the top of the engine, individual throttle bodies, and it really is a masterpiece of an engine, makes a fantastic noise. Now over the years, it's, you know, I'm sure it's had its problems and little tinkering here and there. It's now running beautifully. It's running about 380 horsepower. Not quite the 500 of the quad-cam prototype of its day, but more than enough. This car only weighs about 1,000 kilos, so you can imagine how well this goes down the street. Now, Jim Marland was a fastidious person, and he made the best C-type and D-type replicas. There had been other XJ13 replicas and recreations made, but they weren't quite right. So then he went about making sure that his car was right. So now we move to Proteus XJ13 number 3. This car was built between 1991 and 1993 by a father and son. The father, we believe, was a regional president of Coca-Cola, and in the spare time they went going ahead to build one of these fantastic recreations. The engine was done by Dave Butcher, who was the Jaguar go-to man, or certainly one of them, for these engines in the past. It is now been bored out to 6.1 litres from the original 5.2 that these engines had came with. It's had plenty of work done. It's had dry sumps, alloy tanks, and it has had various fettlings over the years to get it running as well as it can. We believe now it's running around about 380 horsepower, so not quite the 500 of those Jaguar prototype days, but it's certainly more than enough. The car only weighs about 1,000 kilos, we believe. So it's absolutely fantastic in terms of the drive. And to me, the engine is the heart of this car, and they've kind of built the car around it. And you know that when you drive it and the noise and the feeling you get from it. They went to great detail, the builders of this car, to make sure everything was as good as it could. There's wonderful correspondence. We've got history folders, 2 of them, about that thick each. Every bill, every receipt, every correspondence, right onto the original Proteus price list. And we've got correspondence between his offices where they sourced and spoke to ZF to make sure they had the right transaxle gearbox for this car. It's gears to about 175 miles an hour. Haven't tried it. I'm sure it'll be quite interesting. So that car and this car went through various places to be looked after. Notably, come about 97, it went to Don Law, who famously looked after Jaguars, XJ220s and many other cars, and they looked after it. They went through, they sorted out the handling on it and the geometry setup, and made sure that it is described as now having mild understeer going into oversteer with application of the throttle, which is, as ever for a road car, what you really need. They went through lots of little things that they've sorted out for the owners, and this remained in this family's ownership right until 2013. Eventually, after Don Law was looking after it, went to Racing Greens. They looked after it for a number of years as well, and they are another famous Jaguar specialist. Some of the best in the country, these two, and you can tell a level the car was created to. So there's also comments about when the owners said, just do this, money no object, it needs to be right. And the Don Law at the time said it's superb and really is one of the best they've seen. It was then sold around about 2013, and it eventually ended up in a collection abroad, and it's now back home, where it's coming up for sale at the Car Barn. We've done some light recommissioning on the car just to get it back into tip-top roadworthiness condition. but it really is as good as you see it. It was advertised in 2013 as a 3,000 mile car with plenty of patina about it, and it still is like that. It's wonderful. It gives you the feeling of a car that's from the 1960s, and it's something that you'll certainly never see another one of on the road. We're not aware of any others in the UK at the moment, of the 7. I'm sure there may be 1 or 2, but it really is the star of the show. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me go on about this wonderful piece of art. It's been in a Car Barn showroom, where we have a wide selection of interesting and wonderful vehicles. I'm Jonathan from the Car Barn, and now this is our next vehicle to grace our wonderful place in County Durham. Now, I have commented how sad it was that the XJ13 is now in a museum and rarely gets driven. So it'd be very rude of us not to go and take this out for a drive onto the roads and see what it's like with this wonderful engine screaming behind us. So join us for our next video, where we'll go and do just that.